I was born on the 23rd of October 1918, right during the big flu epidemic in Washington, D.C. One of my best friends in high school, his dad was the line chief at Bowling Field in Washington, and I spent many weekends there with him. Mainly we'd go to the gym, but we'd walk right by the line, the flight line. His dad was, like I said, the line chief, and I had access to go get those airplanes if we wanted to and look at them. I never paid any attention. It wasn't in me at that time. I was a musician before the war and was going to be in the President's Marine Band and had qualified. In those days you had to play both reed and string instruments, and I played saxophone and clarinet and cello. So I had passed that test for the Marine Band, but you had to wait for a man to retire. I had to wait 6 months, and I was on a deferred status from the draft. But for some reason, one day, it was the 5th of March, 1941, I think I picked up the mail. My folks had been to Florida for a vacation. And I said, well, I don't get any mail, but I think I'll check it anyway. And there was a card that said, greetings. And this is how fast it was. I had to leave the next morning at 6 a.m. I reported to 6th and Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., to the National Guard Armory. They put me in a band after 3 weeks. They sent me to Texas. Temperatures 90 to 100 degrees. We were on a ridge, a cantonment area with 5 anti-aircraft regiments that had been federalized in October of 40, and they were sent down there, one from Chicago and one from D.C., and I was sent to the one from Washington, D.C., 260th Coast Artillery anti-aircraft. And I found myself at noontime jumping off a cot. They were ferrying 39s and P-38s through Biggsfield, El Paso to Alaska. And I found myself jumping off that cot and running that side because they were coming just barely clearing our tent level, and I could watch them peel off and land at Biggsfield. And I thought, why am I doing this? That's what got me started in thinking about aviation. So I went ahead then and applied for aviation cadets, and that's how I got into the Air Corps then. I went through P-47 training in Florida. First at Tallahassee, Dale Mabry Field, then they moved us to Perry, Florida, down on Route 27. And we had about 130 hours of training in the P-47 before I left to go overseas, and in July of 43, there were 75 of us. They put us on a train. We went up to Presque Isle, Maine, and we flew over from there in C-54s. And we went to a replacement center called Atcham. It was Shrewsbury, England. And because we had that much time in the P-47, they had a lot of pilots who had been in the RAF, and they were getting ready to, checking them out of the P-47, getting ready to put them back into our Army Air Corps. So we only got 4 hours. We were there for 2 months or so. We only got 4 hours a month for pay because we had more time and these people were really starting to transition. So they split us up, and 11 of us went to the 56th Fighter Group, and the rest of that 75 were dispersed to other fighter groups in the 8th Air Force. And so fortunately for me, 11 of us went to the 56th, 4 of us went to the 61st Squadron. The 56th, in fact, any American group, had only been on combat, the fighters, for 5 months when we joined them. And we were there for maybe, in the group for about a couple of months before we ever got to fly our first mission. Their leadership was fantastic. They showed us how the flights operated, their positioning at high altitude for escort. Then they took us up the whole squadron. They showed us how that worked. Then they took the 3 squadrons up, and they had a B-17, and we escorted, and they showed us how that worked. So you had a really good indoctrination before you ever went on your first mission. I'll tell you what what I thought about it. They told us, I figured if you did what they told you to do, you had a good chance of completing your missions in the war. But they said, don't fall back. Be up where we can see you. We don't have to look way back here for, well, I think they thought I was the flight leader because I was really up front. I didn't get back there. I stayed up here right parallel with them until they turned and I'd fall in. But no, that's the way I did it. Just what they said to do, that's what I did. Yeah, my first mission, I flew on the wing of Robert S. Johnson, who was the first one to break Rickenbacker's record, and he shot down a 109 on that mission. So I got to see what it was like, and actually what happened after he made the pass, he broke real hard right, and I wasn't able to stay inside of him. And fortunately for me, when we got up on top, I was with him again. I was really shaking there for a bit, afraid was not going to get back with him. But that was great, and we became very good friends. I roomed with him for a while. As I recall, it was the 6th of February, 1944, and we were over Paris, and there were some clouds, broken clouds, and I don't recall now whether it was I lost my receiver, radio receiver, and they had called to do something, and I didn't hear it because my radio wasn't working properly. So all of a sudden, here I am by myself, and I'm going this way, and the 109 is like we were on a highway. He's going down up. So all I had to do was turn and get on his tail, and I shot him down, and he crashed in the street of Paris. That was my first for victory. And fortunately, I was able to get on back home by myself and land to report my victory. And I had the film to prove that I got him. Yeah, May 12, 1944. It was the first day, and I don't know if you have ever heard of it. It was the first day where we tried what was known as Zemke fan. And we flew in close formation, 45 minutes ahead of the bombers. 3 squadrons, 2 together, and then 1 on top for cover. And we flew into Frankfurt. And when we get to Frankfurt, Germany, each flight was giving a heading to fly, and we were supposed to fly that heading. This was a fan type thing. We were spread so many degrees apart. And I was in this most western flight on that particular mission, and we flew for 15 minutes, as I recall, and then we took a reciprocal and flying back, and I'm about halfway back on my reciprocal, and people started to call in just somebody, bogies here, bogies there, and it sounded like everybody was seeing German fighters. Well, I looked up ahead of me, and here was a whole, I would say, we figured 25 to 30 airplanes, 109s, they still had their tanks on. So I hit my flight and attacked them. And it was amazing to me because they all dropped their tanks at the same time. And I was sort of mesmerized watching tanks. They don't go like this. They flop around, they're going down. And but I got off of that pretty quick and pressed the attack. Well, then they split S. The airplanes went all over the place. So I lashed on to 2 of these, and on the way down, the one that I missed it. One of them got off to the side. I didn't see him, but he split us twice, once one way and then the other way. So I do the same thing, and I'm right on him. We're really, and a P-47 could really dive. There was nothing over there that could dive with a P-47. So we had been told that a 109, if they were vertical at 5,000 feet, they're not going to be able to pull out. Well, watching this, and the fact that I still had that in my little computer up here, I saw this airplane starting to buffet. It was shaking something violently, and I thought, that got my attention. I was strong those days. I put both hands on that stick and pulled back, and it really felt like it was in a vice. So I was on the border of compressibility. I was indicating 575. I took a quick look at that and pulled back hard as I could. And remembering, I haven't mentioned this, but my wingman was on his first mission. And he stayed right with me through this. Well, I had taken one slight shot at this guy. I just pulled my nose through, but like that, I couldn't see if I hit him or not. But he went in, crashed into the ground. That was number 1. So the altimeter was still spinning. It was indicating 1,500 feet, and I was barely clearing the trees. Pulled off of that, and when I started climbing up into 2,000 feet, there's a 109, probably one of those that had split us over here by himself, and pulled up behind him. He never knew what hit him. And I watched a good shot on him, watched him crash. So my wingman, Cleon Thompson, he's still living. I talk to him once in a while. And About that time, we heard our group commander, Fairbanks leader, that was his call sign, Hub Zemke. He said, "I'm 10 miles south of Koblenz, and I'm over the whole Luftwaffe." That's what he said, the very words. So I knew where Koblenz was from my position. I started climbing and heading in that direction, and I got up to 10,000 feet, and I looked out and I said, I had never seen anything like it. It looked like flies over a piece of meat. With all this is what we had known, that they took a prominent landmark, and they send fighters from many different fields, and they rendezvous at that point, and they have an airborne commander who selects so many of them and sends them on up to hit the bombers. Well, it was the biggest gaggle of airplanes I had ever seen, and I thought, boy, what are we going to do with this? So I kept climbing. I looked up, and I saw this lone P-47, and that was Colonel Hub Zemke. So I told him I had him in sight, was climbing up to join him. So when I got there, he said, "You cover me, and and then you can go down. I'll go down, and then you can come down too." So he did, and when the airplane he shot down, he was actually climbing back up when he shot him, and he put him on fire. I've seen a lot of film where they burned, but that's the only one I actually saw alive that really burned. So he got that one, and then he said, "Okay, you can go down." So there's so many airplanes. I've told this story, and that's what I still believe it. The arc that I made before I could get behind somebody without having somebody immediately on me, I believe it was about a 10-mile circle. It was that's how many there were spread out. Well, fortunately for me, I finally found two flying about 50 feet apart. And I pulled in on the first one on the left, gave him a squirt, and the right gear flopped out, and it started to smoke and went into a slow spiral. So I just moved a little right rudder. The other wingman over, he didn't do anything. He didn't move. I moved over, and the same thing, I hit both of them with this has happened to me several times before, and I talked to Gunther Rawl about this after we become good friends since the war. And I asked him, I said, "Did you all have some gimmick where you did this and let us think you were in real trouble when we had you?" He said, "No way." He said, "You hit that hydraulic line, and that gear's going to flop out on it like that." So here they're both spiraling down, smoking with the gear having that. That was number 3 and 4. So about that time, we look over, and here's one climbing up under the butt of our leader, Hub Zemke. So I called him to break, and I said, "You got one," and I thought he's really going to get on me after we get back from this thing. So he said, "Where is it?" And I said, "He's climbing right up your ass." Of course, he never said a thing to me about it, but it's not proper RT. But who knows, in the heat of the battle, and that was quite a battle. Anyway, I turned on this guy, and I got on him, and he did bail out. That was my 5th one. I got on him, and I didn't have too much. I had some good hits around the cockpit, and then it was all I ran out of ammo. So just about that time, Thompson calls a break, and here 2 of them are on us. So we go round and round. Each time I could see they couldn't get me. I was 90 degrees across from them in this circle. But I said, uh-oh. I'm looking back, and I knew they had a lead on him. So I told him to break down and out. And when he came back, to go up above and slice in on us. He came back and joined the same spot. He did that 2 times. It was driving me crazy. In the meantime, I'm turning on the other one, P-109, and getting closer all the time. So the 3rd time, Thompson and the 109 got head-on with each other, and he shot the 109 down, head-on, his first mission. In the meantime, I'm turning. I got up to where I was 50 feet behind this other 109, and I told the wingman, I said, "As soon as we're due east, we're breaking hard right and get out of here." Because really at the time, I should have said, "You come up and shoot him down," but I'm glad I didn't, because he'd have never got back home with the fuel. So we broke hard right and headed back home. And that was the 5. And on the way out, I had a map spread out in front of me because I knew he'd be short on fuel. Always the wingmen are shorter than the leader. So I had the map spread out. I wanted to hit that channel at the narrowest point. And he called the break, and I said, "What is it? fighters or flak? And he said, flak. Well, you know, they could follow. We were only 10,000 feet. So they could, at that altitude, you could look back and I'd take a turn, and the pups, they were right behind us, but not in range. They just were like that turn. They couldn't keep their azimuth on it. So anyway, we got out of their range and we continued on out, heading out, and I could see the coastline. And I looked up and here's a big gaggle of fighters and in real close formation. And they looked like they were on an intercept course with the two of us. I thought, oh no, not after all of this. Because our group had been gone about 45 minutes. They'd gone back home. Well, fortunately for us, it turned out that it was a group of P-47s. And what they were doing over enemy territory, flying in close formation, I never could figure this out. So we crossed the channel and we landed at Manston. It was right on the coast. Cleon Tompkins ran out of fuel on the runway. So I had enough fuel, taxied in, went into the British ops and called our group and got Colonel Zemke on the phone. And I told him that what had happened. I didn't say anything about the victory. I just said, we have to refuel. He said, will you refuel? Come on back. He said, I'd already told him I'd written you off because when he left, we were among 40 or 50 fighters, you know. And he said, I'll hold the group here until you're back for the briefing, to debrief you. So we refueled and shot on back. It wasn't that long a flight, and landed and went in, and then I gave a briefing to the whole group of what had happened. And so my reward that evening, he told him, he said, you make sure that Rankin gets a whole chicken this evening at the Officers Club for dinner. That's the story of the 5 on May the 12th, 1944. As far as I was concerned, once I was in, somebody said bogies, or if you saw them, for some reason, then I became very calm, and I figured I could fly this airplane, and I knew what I was doing. And even when we were in the Luckbury circuit going around, I knew they couldn't touch me. I guess the angle off, you know, they can't get a lead on you, so I never had any real sweat the whole mission, as far as somebody shooting me down. Just lucky, I guess. I loved it because I knew the airplane. I didn't have to think about anything. I knew where everything was, and when you're in combat, you may have time to look in the cockpit. You're looking out in all directions and make sure nobody's coming in on you. But no, I really liked the airplane. It was good for me, and I knew I could fly it. I was confident in the airplane and myself. I wasn't cocky. I was, if you could be an aggressive conservative, that's what I think I was. I ended up with only 10. Yeah, I had 4 before May the 12th, and I accepted. I took on my own a volunteer for a 50-hour extension, hoping to get, I figured something was going to happen sometime soon. But that 50 hours flew by really fast, because we were flying like 3 missions a day. You know, at D-Day, I flew 3 missions, and, you know, it stayed light over there that time of the year till about 11 o'clock at night. So the mission went by very fast, but I got my last victory on the 7th, the day after D-Day. And I also volunteered for another tour. So I did. I finished my 50-hour extension. I went back to the States, and really this took quite a couple of months or so, because you went back by ship, and then you had allowed 30 days at home, and then you went back to a reception center, and you waited around there till they got your orders for you to go back. Well, I was at Atlantic City with my wife. We were there for about 3 weeks, and finally word came through that anybody that had finished a tour or extension, not to let them come back, because they had 1,200 pilots probably at Atcham that had never been assigned to fighter groups yet. So they didn't want us to come back. And maybe it was a good thing, because that fall, when they got the Battle of the Bulge program, and the weather was so bad, and our group had always been long-range escort, but now, like everybody else, they were called on to do ground support for that problem that existed, and they lost more pilots during that month or 2 there with the Battle of the Bulge than they did probably the rest of the war put together. I ended up, I commanded, there's only one other pilot in our Air Force who had commanded 6 fighter squadrons like I did, and converting to different airplanes along the way, and I'm more proud of those 6 squadrons I had. I never lost a pilot, and I'm more proud of that than being an ace. Which squadrons? I first had an 86F squadron at Truax Field in Madison, and I only had those airplanes about 5 or 6 months. We had to convert them to the F-86D, which is the all-weather interceptor. So I had that squadron, and then I had another 86D squadron at McGee-Tyson, which is near Knoxville. And then I went to Command Staff College from there. No, I went to 33rd Division, but there I went to Command Staff College. When I came out of there is when I ended up at, that's when I ended up at McGee-Tyson with the 469th Squadron. They closed that one out, and I went up to Youngstown, Ohio, and converted the squadron there to F-102s. And not only were there about 8 or 9 months, and I had a call from Air Defense Command, said, how would you like to go to Germany? And I said, what was the job? They said, Squadron Command. I said, I'll go tomorrow. Because I didn't get on the continent during the war. I was only flew over it. But so, anyway, I had to go to Stead for survival school and completed that. And when I got home back in Ohio, there was a message to me that my orders had been changed. I'm now going to Fallsburg, France. Same type of airplane, was back to F-86Ds. So I went there and I took the 513th Squadron. I guess I was there about 2 years. And they were converting an F-86D Squadron at Ramstein Air Base to 102s. Because being out had a do squadron in the States, they transferred me up there to command that squadron and convert them. So I had that for 2 years. And my last squadron was an F-101 squadron where you had somebody in the back seat and you had twin engine. I'd never had that experience before. And that was at Tucson, Arizona, where from 30,000 feet over the base, I could see the pass going into San Bernardino, where my oldest boy was going to be graduating from high school. And my boss, a colonel named Leon Gray, well known throughout the Air Force, my boss was at Phoenix. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, Shorty, he said, well, you can leave on Friday afternoon and fly back to San Bernardino for the weekend and come back on Monday morning. So I did that for 2 months on the weekends while I waited for my son to graduate from high school. And he did, and that was the end of I was a full colonel at that time, running that squadron. But this was the year that Goldwater was running for president with L.B. Johnson. And the day after that election, they started taking my people and my airplanes. And if Goldwater had been elected, that squadron would still be there. It was the 15th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. Supposed to be in for a year. 32 years and 25 days later, I got out.